how are you doing? Thank you so much for joining us today. Today's program is part of the Presidential Sources Project and our Presidential Primary Sources Project, and our program today is Talk, Text, and Televise, Communications in the White House. It's being presented to us by the Herbert Hoover, Harry Truman, and Lyndon B. Johnson Presidential Libraries with education specialists Bridget Nash, Sadie Troy, and Sheila Mehta from the respective libraries. The Presidential Primary Sources is a collaboration between Internet 2, the National Archives, and the National Park Service. It's a free series presented every year from January through April. This is just a quick reminder that by participating today, you are agreeing to be recorded and archived. We keep recordings of all of our programs on our YouTube channel so that students and teachers can access them later. Go ahead and share where you're joining us from in the chat box if you would like. You can also be on video. Thank you, Edgewood, for agreeing to be on video. If you're interested in being on video, just leave a message in the chat and we will get you seen. Teachers and students, we encourage you to participate today. Please pull up the chat box and enter any comments or questions there. This is the easiest way to ask the questions today. We want you to participate because interacting during our session is more fun and the learning experience more valuable. We ask that you be respectful, though, of our interactive tools. We want to make sure any questions we're asking or any comments we're making directly relate to our topic being presented today. Thank you again for joining us. We're glad to have you. This is our website if you're interested in more information about our program or you're looking for links to our recording or any other information on our program. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing and pass you to our presenters. Enjoy and have a wonderful time today, ladies.
Thanks, Robin.
Thank you so much, Robin. Thank you very much for that introduction. Before we get started, Edgewood, I already saw a hand up, which we love because we are going to keep this very back and forth. We're going to keep this very conversational, both from information in the chat. So do you want to unmute and let us know your question, Edgewood? Or are you just unmuting to tell us exactly where you're calling from, which we love too?
I think I have to unmute them, don't I?
We're Edgewood, and we're calling from Indianapolis.
Oh.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And we actually have Indiana represented twice then, because Edgewood said they're from Indianapolis. We have the RB History Club that's calling from Indiana. Our own presenter, Miss Bridget Nash, used to even live in Indiana. So that's like a three-peat for that state. So that's awesome.
But not
did we see anybody? So we have Indiana represented. Texas, we had the Samuel Clemens High School coming to us from Texas, where Sheila Mehta is also calling us from. I am outside Kansas City, Missouri. So, you know, we got the middle section of our country really well represented. Anyone else out there want to share? Oh, good. Finally, we got a coast. Jackson's calling from California, which is awesome.
He's up early.
Yeah,
he's up early.
Yes, very glad that he kind of rolled out of bed for this. And so I'm so excited to talk with you all today. Thank you so much for joining us. Sheila, Bridget, and I had a really awesome time putting this together, thinking about ways where, thank you, as sharing our screen, different ways to look at the presidency and how not only did the three presidents that we represent, Herbert Hoover, Harry Truman, Lyndon Johnson, not only did they change the presidency and kind of how presidents interact politically, they also were part of very big technological movements and really changed how presidents utilize technology to gain more access and more communication with the American people. So that's what we're going to cover today. We're super excited. How many of you guys out there are technology fans? We got some big technology fans out there. I mean, considering that all of us are virtually calling from classrooms or our homes or our schools and our work to come together to talk about the presidents, I think we're all pretty pretty big on technology. As I mentioned, we're going to keep this very back and forth. I'd love for you guys to answer questions or ask questions in the chat, but we also have questions that we're going to ask you guys, particularly this first one here. We're going to be talking about a lot of different technologies and changes. And so our first little thing is a quiz for you. If you type in the chat, put these technologies in order from when they were invented, right? So as Plainview said, TVs don't look like this anymore. They sure don't, but that is a TV. So we have TVs, rocket ships, and microphones. This is all going to make sense later as we talk, but somebody help us put these technologies in order. A TV, a rocket, and a microphone.
And I would say, Sadie, let's think about TVs when they did look like that. That's probably a good one.
Yeah, right? There's a reason we didn't put on flat screen TVs, right? That's a very good point, Sheila. Yeah, so we have some answers coming in the chat. We can see we have some people making these guesses. We have some really good guesses. It seems like people, they're a little torn. They're a little torn. So Galileo and Edgewood think it goes A, C, B. So they're going TV, microphone, rocket. We have Linda G, who is going C, A, B. So microphone, TV, rocket. And Galileo was saying some students. So even Galileo itself is torn. And what a great scientific name to join our call today, Galileo. I love that. So CAB is also part of their guess. Sheila, Bridget, does anybody want to give them a drum roll for the answers?
Edgewood's getting in there with that drum roll. They're feeling it.
Oh, I love it. And the answer is CAB. That is correct. So Edgewood, so Galileo, and Linda, you guys had it correct. So it went the microphone, the television, and then the rocket ships. And this is the order we're actually going to talk about how these technologies build on each other. But before we talk about the technologies, we actually have another question for you all.
All right. Since we come representing presidential libraries, Sadie, Bridget, and we thought we would challenge you to what is the order of our presidents? So we have President Truman on the left, represented by A, President Hoover in the center, represented by the letter B, and President Johnson on the right side, represented by the letter C. So what is the order of our presidents on the screen and the presidents coming to you from their libraries? We've got some BAC, we've got some CAB, BAC again. See, we have some new folks. Winthrop Lane is joining us. There's another one that we saw that I think we forgot to mention. Plainview is here. I'm excited y'all are joining us. What is the order? We have an ACB.
This is tricky because all of their suits kind of look the same, right? It's hard to find little things to decipher and think about what looks different.
I know, and I purposely didn't find color pictures of anyone so that it would kind of give them a level playing field a little bit. I purposely tried to stump y'all. I don't know that I stumped everyone, though. We've got some right answers in the chat.
We've got some right answers.
Yeah. Okay, Edgewood, hit us with the drum roll. Thank you. And the correct answer is BAC. We have President Hoover coming to us from the 20s, President Truman getting in the 40s and 50s, and President Johnson into the 60s. So well done and good guesses. We couldn't tell from the pictures. So nice educated guesses, our friends.
All right, friends, you did such a great job with the previous two. Let's check out these technologies and see which ones came first in the White House. Okay, so now talked about this technology. Now let's place them in the White House. Okay, so the pictures you see on the screen, there's a phone, there's electricity, there's a typewriter, and then a telegraph. Okay, and we're looking at the years 1866, 1878, 1880, and 1891. So which one do you think came first in 1866? Telephone, typewriter, electricity, or telegraph?
I don't think these students knew how hard we were going to challenge them when they signed up for this.
Do you
When
think
they
came
signed up.
first? Okay,
We have a couple guesses coming in.
got telegraph, we've got a
Mhm.
typewriter.
Which one do you think is first?
Oh, okay, we've got another typewriter with Edgewood. All right, here we go. So in 1866, we have the very first White House telegraph office. So Linda G, you got the telegraph, 1866. All right,
Nice job.
1878, what came next? Telephone, electricity, or typewriter?
Bridget, this one's
is
hard because you
hard.
have two that are like close to each other in dates, 78 and 80.
I know.
Oh,
I know, and
Okay,
I don't even
so
know
we
this
have-
answer. Harry Truman wasn't even born in 1878. So I don't even know this answer.
Okay, so far we have typewriter and electricity. Oh, another typewriter. All right, so 1876. Oh, and a third typewriter. Lots of typewriters, but that's not right. 1878, we actually see the first White House telephone.
stop.
What?
I know. Some of you are like, wait a second. What about electricity? So
I think it was wrong. I'm glad I didn't say it out loud, but you know what? That's okay to be wrong.
So now we're down to two. You guys have 50-50 chance, right? So 1880, you can guess electricity or typewriter. Typewriter, which one? Yes, Galileo STEM, you are right with the typewriter. So then in 1891, so in 1880, the White House staff actually started using the typewriters. And then in 1891, that's when electricity was finally installed in the White House. Good job.
Yeah, and you wouldn't think electricity comes last, right? But
No,
what we don't, what sometimes we forget to realize is just exactly how a telegraph and a telephone work, and they don't work on electricity. Yeah.
Oh, okay. That's okay, Galileo.
Thanks for coming back.
So now before becoming president, Herbert Hoover served as the Secretary of Commerce during the 1920s. Does anybody know what the 1920s were known as? Known as, or what they were known for? Yes, the Roaring 20s. So what happened during the Roaring 20s?
All the lions escaped from the zoo
Wait, but did that happen?
and just roared all over the cities.
Oh.
That would be
I was very
amazing.
excited that might have been the answer, Sadie.
Yes, great. No, that is exactly right. So in the 1920s, you guys are right. Yes, there were parties, especially if you've read the Great Gatsby. Okay, so the Roaring 20s were known for their technological innovation, and it's during the 20s when the radio's popularity skyrocketed. Now, seeing the potential of the radio as a form of entertainment and communication, Hoover convened the first radio conference in February 1922, where he spearheaded efforts to improve radio technology and to regulate the airwaves. Now, with his guidance, radios grew from less than 1,000 sets in 1922 to more than 6 million in 1927. And the photo you see of him right there is the summer of 1928. And he's listening to his nomination for president over the radio.
Click forward.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay, perfect.
That's why I was like,
1927, the telephone was 51 years old. In a New York auditorium, a handful of people were given a glimpse of the future. It was called television. The show, if you could call it that, originated in Washington, D.C., and starred Herbert Hoover, then Secretary of Commerce. This first crude transmission was the work of engineers from Bell Laboratories. They had invented the transmission system, not for the sake of entertainment, but to learn more about long-distance networks. At the time, few people realized just how successful the experiment would turn out to be. Today, the phone company is still deeply involved in television. In fact, the network shows you enjoy, including the one you're watching now, are brought to you through the facilities of the Bell system.
all right. So what you just watched was real footage of the very first public demonstration of television. How cool is that? Okay, so as Secretary of Commerce, next slide, please. Hoover, who you see in this photo right here, was the first person to be broadcast on TV when he took part in the first demonstration, the first public demonstration of television. And you see the little diagram at the very, very bottom? This kind of shows you what you saw in the video. So on this side, you see Hoover. Okay, he's in DC, he's in Washington, DC. He was talking into a telephone receiver to transmit the sound. And then on this side, you see his image and his voice being received in New York. Next slide, please. So during the Hoovers, Herbert Hoover's 1928 presidential campaign, he used both silent film. There's a silent campaign film called Master of Emergencies. It was played in movie theaters across the nation. And he was the first to deliver a broadcast campaign speech on the radio. And that's what you see in this photo right here. So he made 7 campaign speeches total, including this one here in West Branch, Iowa. Okay, this is his hometown. And this speech was broadcast. You see those microphones in front of him. It was those broadcast his speech in real time throughout the nation. And so what's really cool about this is that for the first time, okay, so for a long time, people had to read politicians' words, right? They had to read the speeches, but the radio made it possible for people to actually be able to listen to the politicians in real time. And all of a sudden, their personalities started to matter a little bit more when they were campaigning. Next slide, please. So President Hoover, he was inaugurated as the 31st president of the United States, March 4th, 1929, and was the first presidential inauguration to be recorded on a sound newsreel. Next slide, please.
My countrymen, this occasion is not alone the administration of the most sacred oath which can be assumed by an American citizen. It is a dedication and a consecration under God to the highest office in the service of our people. I assume this trust in the humility of knowledge that only.
Okay, so you're actually hearing his, no, it wasn't at night. So these are really great questions. So you're actually hearing President Hoover. Okay, so he's broadcasting on the radio, but they have film crews there. So they're creating this sound newsreel, which were actually done by movie production companies at this time. And he does sound kind of old-timey, which is awesome. I think it's a lot of fun because now you get to hear this president that you don't normally get to hear, which is really cool. But it's not at night. It's just the way that the video was picked up right before this when he's walking down the stairs to where they deliver the speech is much brighter. But So because TVs were not wildly popular until after like World War II, newsreels like the one you just saw would be played in theaters across the nation. Okay. Now, show of hands or put it into the chat, because I know we can see Edgewood here. How many of you have ever watched a movie in a movie theater before? Yeah, okay. Now, do you remember, think to the movie theater last time you were there, do you remember like the commercials and the advertisements they play before the movie starts? Yes, yep. So that's where they would play these newsreels, okay? So these newsreels, while they were recorded in real time, they would be played later, right? At the movie theater, across the nation, much, much later. So that's where they played the newsreels. Next slide, please. Okay, now earlier we mentioned that the phones entered the White House in 1878. Okay, did you know that until President Hoover, presidents had to go out into a lobby area to use the phone? Yeah, so people say that President Hoover got tired of walking out into the lobby to take a phone call, so he had one installed in the Oval Office. Now, regardless of whether that story is true or not, what is true is that he was the first president to have a telephone in the Oval Office in 1930. Okay, next slide. All right, so here's our would you rather, okay? Get ready to light up the chat. Would you rather A, read the speech of somebody running for president, B, listen to them in real time on the radio, or C, watch and hear them on the movie screen after the event? Which would you rather do? All right, we've got lots of C's. Watch and hear them on the movie screen after the event.
And Edgewood, if you want to come up and unmute and have someone give their letter and their reasoning, you're welcome to do that too.
Yeah, love it. We got some A's and some B's. Okay, so those of you that are doing it in the chat, why? Why would you rather watch and hear them after the event rather than listening to them in real time on the radio?
All right, Edgewood, give us your letter and reasoning.
I'll pick letter C because I don't like to read and I don't like to listen on the radio. I gotta watch them.
Love it. Fair. Love it.
We're so used to the technology where we get to read and listen and see things that we have a preference, don't we?
Yes,
But
we
not
do.
everybody. There's a lot of variety in the chat.
Oh, I love it. Yeah, so we have one student saying that they would rather read it because then they can take their time.
Sharp Homeschool also says read it. So there's not just one.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, yeah, we're used to see, right? We're used to watching and hearing them on the movie screen or on the TV screen or social media on our phones after fact, right? All right.
Bridget, after seeing and researching everything about Hoover and reading his speeches, hearing them, seeing the video, which one are you picking?
Ooh, good question. So I kind of like listening to them, However, when I came across this inauguration clip, it was kind of fun to see and hear. Because it was a while before we found these, because they're just starting to digitize all of these. And so it's really weird. Like even when I heard Lou's voice for the first time, it's weird.
Mrs. Hoover. Lou is Mrs. Hoover.
Yes, Lou Henry Hoover, his wife, First Lady. It's just weird to, after you see all of these photos and reading, to hear. So it's very cool to hear them.
Awesome. Well, I want to keep talking about the television, and I want to build on it because, as Bridget showed us, like Hoover was on TV, right? He did that first commercial. They were able in Hoover's time to videotape, or to video or film, I guess I should use the term film, presidents and then show them on newsreels. But when we fast forward from the 20s to the late 40s and early 50s, technology has changed. And so President Truman is taking that new technology of the TV and kind of taking it further than any other president has, and really shaping his political relationship with the people in a whole new way. So if we go to the next slide, we'll see that, as we talked about, the TV was already invented. People would go to the movie theaters and see newsreels, or they would see newsreels of events after they happened. They would be filmed and then they could watch them, whether at home or at the theater. Truman, what his technology is that he's the first inauguration that's live on TV. How many of you all watched the most recent inauguration or have watched an inauguration of a US president in the past, right? We just had one in January, but we had one 4 years before that and 4 years before that. How many of you have seen, right, and so on and so on. Okay, so Galileo, Sharp, Plainview, you guys have all seen it, right? There are these big moments where it's these celebrations, right? Tons of people from politics are there. The president, the vice president, they take the oath of office, and then the president gives a speech. And so before Truman's inauguration, people would have to listen to the speech on the radio if they wanted to listen to it live. They could watch it later on in the movie theater as part of a newsreel. They could read about it in the newspaper. But for the first time ever in 1948, for Truman's inauguration, people got to watch him become president right in their very living rooms, right in their own homes, in their living rooms or in their kitchen, wherever they had the television, right? And so from now, at this point, technology is not just sharing the message of what's happening in Washington to people, it's physically bringing it into their homes so that they can see it live. And that was an incredible kind of turning point, right? As Bridget said, that's when personalities are really coming out for presidents, and and because you're now, politics isn't just in Washington, D.C., which could be 10,000 miles away, right? We saw Jackson's in California. That's about as far from Washington, D.C. as you could get. But now Washington, D.C. can be in your house, right? It can be in your living room as you see it. Because on the next slide, not only was the inauguration shown live, but now any speech a president gives from the White House can be televised directly. So the American people are getting to see the president's face, kind of building that relationship with him, and along with hearing his voice, right? And then also that kind of helps the White House become more of a place that feels like America's house, because you're actually seeing images of it within your own home. As we go to the next slide, one of my favorite things about Truman, just like Hoover put the first telephone in the Oval Office, Truman put the first television. Yeah, can you find it? I know it's a faraway picture, but with all that stuff, can you find the television in it? Way in the back, the big screen. If you look closely, it's almost like the knobs are bigger than the screen to turn to the different channels. But this is a point where news was happening live now on TV at different times. So Truman not only could watch evening shows, but he could also hear the news and how his work was being reported on. So not only did it take politics into other people's houses, it brought it right into Truman's house, the White House. And I love this picture. This is very much a real picture of Truman turning in his desk, you can see, and watching TV with his press secretary. I'm not sure what he's watching, but Truman was a big baseball fan, so maybe he was watching a baseball game on the TV. That's just totally a guess.
I don't know, with that happy smile, it looks like he might be watching some baseball.
Right. I think his smile is too happy to be watching something about politics, right? Because during Truman's presidency, World War II is ending. He's in fights with congressmen as they're trying to pass new laws for education and Social Security. He's fighting with the Soviets in the USSR at the beginning of the Cold War. So it must be something kind of lighthearted that's on the TV that he's watching here. The final piece that I want to share, because Truman is utilizing the TV in all these new ways, he's also the first president to have his farewell address put on TV. So Truman was able to address the nation live. How many of you all have seen when big moments happen, the president does a press conference on TV? I can picture one that I greatly remember is when President Obama came on the television to announce that Osama bin Laden had been killed, or all the different types of press conferences. We have them now with President Trump, and that is, as big news breaks, this is the ability for the president to explain things to us in their own words. And Truman utilized that, because before, again, the farewell address, it was a speech, sure, he gave it to Congress, sure, it was in the paper, but now people get to see him in their home and really reflect on the work that they did. So what I want to put on the slide, which I lied, this is my final slide coming up. How do you think the TV changed the way people viewed President Truman? I want to know your thoughts. Do you think Truman utilizing the television for speeches, for his inauguration, for his farewell address, do you think that changed the way people may have seen Truman or even seen other presidents, right? Do you think that changed the relationship between the presidents and the people? As we have, our friends type in the chat, let's definitely hear from Edgewood. If you want to have two students come up and explain their answer. Go ahead. Edgewood.
The TV made it easier so that someone didn't have to travel like 6 miles just to hear his speech.
That's a really great point, right? Not everybody lives by a movie theater. So now they can get their news without having to move around.
Good answer.
That is a great answer. Galileo added that it made him more relatable. Maybe they liked him more because of it. Plainview said it definitely changed because now Truman was accessible, right? He was not just some faraway politician. Edgewood, what do you got?
Oh. And he was more relatable, and seeing his face probably made people like realize how much responsibility he had and how they can compare that to themselves.
Oh, I love that answer. Absolutely, right? Being able to see his emotions as he's talking about hard decisions probably made him much more relatable, and for them to understand how hard he was working, even if they didn't agree with him, they may have seen, right, the struggles and the pressure that he was under. And I love that you said, and then that allowed them to compare it to their lives, what they were going through or decisions they were making. What do you have, Edgewood? Let's get one more good one. Oh, hold on, you're still muted. Let's unmute. There we go.
They knew, like, they could see him, but also they know that he's a good president.
Oh.
Yeah, I love, right? They could see him. It's not just some picture in a newspaper, right? They can see how he moves. They can see his expressions, and they can see him any day, right? Every day. They don't necessarily have social media like we do, so they can't see him 24/7, but this is definitely another way to see him. So absolutely. Thank you, guys. I think it changed too. But his isn't the only president who got cool technology to utilize, is it, Sheila?
Oh no. Oh no. I feel like I get the funnest part. Y'all had all the developments of technology, but I get to talk about the fun ways that it was used in the White House. And part of that is because under President Lyndon Johnson, and when he comes into office in 1960s, 1963 specifically, a lot of the technologies that existed aren't new at all. You can see, on the in the top corner that we have those the cameras that are broadcasting him on TV. In fact, I love this picture because the cameras are recording him and you see him on the TV live. That just kind of messes with your brain a little bit. We'll have a couple pictures like that in our time together, but you can see that. And then, of course, the telephone. Yes, his secretary has two different phones. No, I have no idea who she's talking to or whom she's talking to because it's more than one. That's got to be a hard conversation. But you also see a typewriter in the corner. Do you see the edge, the knob to wind it? So we're seeing all these different technologies. And then down at the bottom, President Johnson didn't just have a TV, he had 3 TVs, which it's got to be loud, right? But a fun fact is he actually had the first remote control for the television in his office and in the White House. Part of that was because in the 1960s, there was only 3 TV channels. Take a minute and process that, my friends. There was only 3 TV channels, and that was NBC, CBS, and ABC. And guess what was on each of those screens? CBS, ABC, and NBC. And so he would choose which one he was listening to. So the remote control just controlled the volume. That's all it did. Which volume or which TV was he listening to, and then how high and low was that volume. But it's weird because it's like this big. It's like huge. It's bigger than our phones are. But it was early technology, and we know like even the phone that his secretary has in this picture is bigger than the phones that we have today, right? Oh, you can't see that. There we go. And so it's really interesting. So he didn't have new technology yet, but he did start to use it in really creative ways. One of the things that we see is he was very present, like Sadie was talking about. Now that the American public can see the president from television and just nonstop television, right? Well, I shouldn't say that because did you know there used to be a time when TV wasn't 24 hours a day, that it would stop at like 10:30, 11 o'clock at night, and then it would just go to that, they call it white noise and static, that black and white fuzzy looking, and they go, didn't think I was going to do that in my work day today, but that's what it is. And then it would come on in the morning with the news. So the would be like, good morning. I'm assuming that's an old-timey voice of someone. Welcome to the news at 6 a.m. And that's when your news day would start. And so he realized that if everyone could hear him at the same time, that was actually really powerful to talk to Americans. And he made a lot of speeches. Now, not everything was televised. It was still less televised than we have today, but it was pretty neat. I do like this picture on the left because look at who LBJ is watching. Do you catch it? He's watching himself on all 3 TVs. It's something that was recorded earlier. It wasn't live. I looked really hard for funny pictures for y'all. And part of it was because Bridget and Sadie got to have the fun new pictures. So I had to step up my game and find the fun pictures. So here's LBJ looking at pictures of or video of himself on the news. And then on the right is him posing. It's in front of a speech that he's giving live, but is also being recorded. If you notice the shot that we had of, actually, I'll go back to it real quick, of President Truman, and you see all those cameras in there, right? So those are all the different places that are recording because they don't share the video. Well, when we get to President Johnson, they actually start to share the video. So there's one White House video, they'll share it out. Everyone will get access to it. We're not that central today. Now we do have a lot of different cameras that can come in, but there's not nearly as many as you would think. And some of that is because of the way our news networks work. And so some of the other technologies that we were talking about is really thinking about what technological growth meant. At the top, you can see President Johnson with all these ladies. Do you know what he's standing by and what they're standing by? Let's see that in the chat. That's what Edgewood has an idea. What is the technology shown in the top? Oh, there was a question in the chat that was a good question. Was the teleprompter available during Johnson's presidency? Yes, they did have teleprompters, but they were paper. They were actually paper reels that came through. And so they literally rotated a paper roll and the words came through. They weren't a TV screen. Okay. Plainview had the correct answer. Nice guess. That is a telephone switchboard. So we talk about being able to connect via telephone, but now there's so many lines in the White House, telephone lines, not just the one in the lobby and the one in President Hoover's desk, right? We have so many that this is the White House switchboard team. So these ladies are all wearing headsets if you kind of look closely and squint, and they would take the phone lines out of one and place them into the other line it needed to connect with. That's why they say, I'll connect you with someone, or a phone connection, is because you literally had to join those wires together to connect to people through phone connections, right? So this is the team that made the White House phones work. And it's a big team. Now I can imagine everything's digital. There might be one, right? Bridget, Sadie, do we know? I would imagine maybe one, and they have other jobs too, right? Yeah, definitely not a team of switchboard operators. But yes, somebody guessed that it looked like a computer, and you're right. It does look like a computer, and in a way, it kind of is its own version of a computer, right? But LBJ loved technology because look at his car at the bottom. What do you notice about it? Yeah, it's in the water, isn't it? He had what a very rare car. You can't find them pretty much anymore, but it's called an amphicar. So an amphibious car that you could go from land straight into water, and you press a button and it turned into a boat. It kind of looks like it's made for a cartoon, right? I'm sure you've seen things like that on cartoons. He had a real one. Now he would play jokes on people and pretend like his brakes were going out and that he would crash into his lake or the river where they were by, and people would be like, "Oh my gosh!" And then he would be like, and then just toot around. He loved to prank people, but he also loved technology. He embraced it and he used it for some really cool things. Um, Something to keep in mind too is that the 1960s were the time of the Cold War. It was the space race. There was a lot of technological development that came after World War II, and really realizing the role that technology can play in our lives. I mean, we are dependent on it, right? And this is actually a really short excerpt of a phone call that President Johnson had with a congressman out of Arkansas, and his name was John McClellan. And they were talking about the space race and the need for America to be the first, to make all these big, achievements in space and get to the moon, which was the goal, but they hadn't done that yet. And I love this part because this is where President Johnson noticed and like recognizes the possibility that the space race has for technology, but he doesn't know what that is. So I'm going to call Bridget and Sadie. I'm going to call on them to be our readers for this. I don't know, Bridget, do you want to be our LBJ and try to channel your Southern accent? And Sadie, you can, well, I guess he's from Arkansas, so you can channel your Southern accent too. Let's see how you do to read this part of the phone call.
All this research. This research is the most important thing we can do.
You can't make some people see it, but you got to.
John, 75% of the things that we will be making 25 years from now, we've never heard of now. That's how fast this world changes. And in the year 2000, we're going to have 80% of our people, over 300 million, living in cities of the country. And this world is shifting and changing so fast.
Right. So thank you. Very nice, our readers. And what's so interesting is he knew things are going to change. He can't even believe what's going to happen, but he believes it's going to happen. And that's what's so neat is he just said, sky's the limit. And actually, it wasn't even the sky that was the limit. He would go beyond that. It was during his time in office that the news, like, Sadie was talking about, you could see the president in your home, right? You could sit in front of the television. You could see how DC could be brought to you, how your voice could be heard from DC out to New York. But what was interesting is while the United States was engaged in this war, this conflict in Vietnam, news reporters for the first time were able to go out into another country and bring the news back into the United States and into your living room. Now, this was good and it was bad. The good thing was people could hear it very quickly. They weren't reporting live, to be fair. They had to send in their recorded video. They had to mail it back to the United States, but they got to see it much quicker than a letter being mailed and getting published in the newspaper and getting out to folks. It just had to get to the news station, and then the video would be played on the news, and people could see it very quickly comparatively. And that's actually what you see in the pictures here. This is a very famous reporter during the Vietnam War, somebody who has actually come to the LBJ library very often. His name's Dan Rather. And he was one of the reporters that were able to bring this conflict into people's home. Now, the sad part about that is sometimes they heard and saw things that were really uncomfortable. And they had to process this. So while you get the good of reporting and access and people, you also get some of the hard things about the way that the world works. And it was the responsibility of the reporters now to bring that into your homes. And so they had to really think about what technology looked like. And we also have the difference, and this happened during President Johnson's time, of what the president and the government saying has happened versus what people are seeing, news reporters like Dan Rather reporting. And sometimes they didn't match up. So then what do you believe? Do you believe what you see on the news or what you hear from the government? And I think we all kind of know our answer, and that was kind of hard. But he didn't stop at bringing in the country and other countries into the United States. He literally went to space and now beyond. Here's a really cool photo of President Johnson on the phone, on the TV, talking live with an astronaut from outer space in 1968. So here we're using an old technology, the phone, and an old technology of the television, but he's talking to an astronaut in space. It's the first time that a president had talked to an astronaut while they were in space. So it's really neat that you can see even the astronaut has a phone. So they're still using these old technologies because it's still the best technology that they have. In fact, when we talk with astronauts today, it is a form of Zoom, by the way. That's how they use it. It's video that comes with the microphone. These microphones are no different than a telephone. They're just much smaller, right? And so this is a kind of a neat one. You can also see here at the bottom, he's got his notes that he wants to say because that transmission is going to be so short. He wants to make sure that he can say all the things he wants to and that he can have that conversation before the communication will cut out. It's really neat. NASA still does this. You can actually talk to astronauts while they're at the space station today. You have to sign up. It's a really long waiting list, but it's really cool that you can do that, right? So as we wrap up our time today, some things to think about. Now I'll turn it back over to Bridget and Sadie.
So the first question we have that we want you to consider is, how did new technologies change the way presidents connected with the American public? So kind of think about that. How does that kind of evolution, how does it change the way they're connected? But then the other two questions we have for you too, as you're kind of thinking about those changes, what technology in the White House do you think is the most important today? Right? We've seen the telephone, the microphone, the TV. We've seen all that in the past. Which do you think is the most? Is there one today that's more important than others? And what do you think the next new technology in the White House will be? Where do you see technology going? I know you all experience a lot of different forms of technology. So what do you think is the most important right now? And what do you think the next new cool piece is going to be? Bridget, if you're talking to us,
Yeah.
you are fully muted.
So sorry, friend. Um, so Plainview, for your very first question, they thought that the volume, that there are so many more opportunities, because of the technology. And then they think today computers, and then I assume robots is for the next one.
Oh, okay.
Oh, I bet we're gonna start seeing some robots in some way, shape, or
Ooh.
form. You think?
And then Winthrop says most important tech would be the security systems.
Solid point, Winthrop.
Yeah, very, very important. Edgewood has
Edgewood,
a
yeah.
they've got a thought. Go ahead, Edgewood.
I think if they didn't have televisions, then it would be harder for them to know about the phones, which would cause technology and like robots and stuff. We wouldn't have that.
Good point.
Absolutely, right? If we like so much of this, I hope you're seeing, right? Kind of there's that thread, right? Everything is built on the knowledge that comes before it. So being able to have the television and understanding the electricity that builds on and what that changes to, and then how now our phones have TVs on them, like it's so yeah, we wouldn't have any of this. That is such a great point. I'm trying to see other ones that popped up.
Well, and I would be curious with the third one, if any of you were president, what kind of technology would you want to have in the White House at your disposal? What would you use? Would you develop something new, update something? What would you like to see? What is that next new technology when you enter the White House?
And Edward's got a contribution. Come on, Edward, let's know what you think.
I think they could like type in to like a small rocket that would shoot up to the spacecraft and deliver it really quickly.
I love that idea. Like it's almost like a telegram, but you put it in a rocket ship and it sends it up. For all of us who are super old, like teachers out there, I'm picturing that thing that used to be at the bank where you would put in your money for the deposit and it would shoot through. I'm picturing that, but a rocket ship taking those notes up to the solar system.
Okay, Miss Sadie, don't be throwing around old because they still use that today. Okay, thank you.
Do they? Okay. Well,
yes.
I haven't been to a bank in a while.
See, I thought DoorDash for astronauts when he was talking. That's immediately where I went. Was
you know,
the astronauts could be like, I need a burger. And we'd pop
I was
it
like,
in.
who wouldn't want some French fries up in space?
Jackson's
Ooh.
got some new technology that they would use, Apple Vision Pros,
Smart.
Tesla robots, and Edgewood's robots seem to be the main answer because Edgewood is thinking human robots, flying cars. So not just cars that go through the water, but flying cars.
I'm with you, Edgewood. I like a good flying car idea. I'm here for that. Yeah.
And along with human robots, has anyone seen those videos of the robots that look like dogs? They like walk on 4 legs. That would be cool to have in the White House, right?
Hey,
I feel like a president had one.
Did they?
I feel like a president had one, like just to play with, not like officially in the White House, like it was the pet, but like somebody did a demonstration. I'm gonna look this up while y'all are finishing up.
I love that. I saw a video in Kansas City, Sadie, of somebody walking on the street with the dog. Do you have a lot of them walking the streets?
Wait, they were walking their robot dog?
Yes.
Awesome.
Kansas
Do they know they don't need to?
I can't wait to see that dog, but I wanted to say we have 5 minutes left. And so if any of the classes out there have questions for us about technology in the White House or about any of our presidential periods that we talk about within our administrations, let us know. You can type in the chat, you can unmute, but we definitely want to answer questions you guys have too. And I will say, you all have been fabulous this whole time. You have asked, or you have answered so many of our questions, and we can't thank you enough.
And to answer, There was a robot dog once in the White House that I can find confirmed, and it was a technology security demonstration. The Secret Service was testing out a robot dog under the Trump administration. So they were seeing how the possibility might work. So I knew it was sometime recently, but there it is.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm. But it's that robot dog that kind of looks a little bit like an alien, but the ones that you can like buy look a little bit friendlier. So this was one that was a very intimidating looking robot dog. For
The
Secret
one with just like the legs with no.
Yes,
like,
that's kind of
and
like a
that one.
spider.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, we're not really encouraging people to answer questions. We're just telling them fun facts.
Okay, if
But
you have
also
any
it's
more
awesome.
questions, though, do put it in the chat. Oh, there's one now from Edgewood with their
Okay.
remaining few minutes.
Oh, good
Okay.
question, Edwin.
I'll be quick. Did Hoover make technology popular or was it already popular? So I will tell you right now. So it was at this time in the 20s, right? It's new. It's starting to develop, right? Over at the very beginning. Now I will tell you, Lou Henry Hoover, his wife, huge into technology. She had so many video cameras. A lot of the film that we have of Hoover, or the photos that we have of Hoover are all from her. Okay. While Hoover loved technology, he was also very, very private and kind of stayed away from the public kind of persona. But yeah, so the combo of the two kind of really they grasped onto it. They started to utilize it. But yeah, it was a great time, the 20s, for all that technology coming up. That's a great question, Edgewood.
Well, it doesn't look like there are any other questions for us. So thank you
Yep.
all so much for participating. I hope you learned something new about how technology has influenced different presidents. Oh my God, yay! I love all this waving. And I hope you enjoyed. Thank you so much for answering our questions.
All right. Well, thank you, ladies, very much. Thank you all, students, for attending today's session. We really appreciate your participation, which I think went very well, and your very thoughtful questions today. Thank you to our presenters, Bridget, Sheila, and Sadie, for your time and for doing a wonderful job bringing